Hello everyone, and welcome to part 4 of our intermediate webinar series, Making Figures with ggplot2, Themes and Legends. In this section, we're going to go over even more ways to customize your figures, as well as their legends, using ggplot2's theme function. For our example data, we're going to be using the same data from the previous sections, which is an assembly QC table from the program Quast, and we're going to read it in using the read.delim function into a variable called df. The first thing we're going to go over are built-in themes. ggplot2 has a number of built-in themes you can choose from for your figures, and as you may have noticed, the default has a gray background with white grid lines. You can use the help function to search for different types of themes available in ggplot2, or you can use the search bar in the help tab. So let's go ahead and do just that, and this will lead us to a page called Gray Theme, which is under a documentation for ggtheme, and this just has the number of different built-in themes listed as well as their parameters, and we're just going to rapid fire go through these. So, starting off with the classic dark on light ggplot2 theme, let's load in the ggplot2 library with the library function, and then just graph a box plot of species versus total length. And this is actually my favorite default built-in theme, which is theme_BW. So yep, there's no gray here, just gray grid lines, and everything is white by default. Now next is a theme with only black lines of various widths on white backgrounds, and that is theme line draw. I'm not super fond of this. It's great contrast for the grid lines, but personally my eyeballs find this a little bit harsh. There's also a theme similar to theme line draw, but with gray lines and axes, and that's theme light. And personally, this is very Goldilocks of me, but this is not enough contrast for me. Again, this is very personal preference. Everybody's eyes are different. We're going to talk about colors later, and we'll definitely talk about the importance of colorblind friendly palettes. But, like I said, everyone's different. Keep in mind that there are more universal inclusive options out there that include those of us who are colorblind or have other different accessibility needs when it comes to figure visualization. So now we have the dark cousin of theme light with some similar line sizes but a dark background. Not my favorite, again, because there's not a lot of contrast between the background and the axes. And then we have our minimalist theme with no background annotations, which is theme minimal. This has no grid to differentiate between the axes and the data. And then we have our classic theme with x-axis lines and y-axis lines, but no grid lines, and that's theme classic. I personally prefer grid lines because it allows my eye to follow the line all the way to the axis. And then for the most chaotic among us, we have a completely empty theme, which is theme void, very appropriately named, and that has only the data, no axis, no labels, nothing to it. There are many other modules in R that have been coded to include more built-in themes. One of my favorite UI themes is Dracula. It's a very soothing dark mode color palette. And somebody actually made a Dracula theme for figures in ggplot called GG Dracula. So let's load that in, and then we're going to graph that using the theme_Dracula function. If you've ever seen Dracula before, this is what the general color palette looks like, where it has a dark, kind of blue tinted black background with purple font and gray grid lines, and the same kind of like purple-gray axes that match the text on the labels for the X and Y axis. You can change basic elements of these themes using base size, base family, base line size, and base rect size parameters. This is again what the theme looks like by default with the theme_BW function included. We're going to set the base size equal to 17. And then we're going to set the baseline size and base rect size to base size divided by 22. So let's store base size as a variable and then run that code. And as you can see, we have changed both the font as well as the size for the font lines and the rectangle that surrounds the plot. Now the Windows Fonts function can tell you the fonts that are available for you to choose from. There are other packages to increase the number of fonts to choose from. For example, extra fonts. I'm not a fan of serif fonts. I prefer sans serif fonts. But let's go ahead and run the Windows fonts function. And these are what the various fonts are set to for serif, sans, and mono. And so I believe, let's just run this real quick, but I believe that the sans font is what's by default. Yes. And then serif you can set it to, or alternatively, you could set it to mono. And that's a different font as well. So the next thing we're going to discuss is manually customizing fonts with theme, because these are built-in themes, but there really are very few limits to the amount of customization you can do for a theme, given how many parameters the theme function has. Let's just take a quick look at those using the question mark function, or rather functionality. Oops, I misspelled. Let's go ahead and take a look at that function and the documentation associated with it. As you can see, the number of parameters that you can use to customize theme is quite extensive, and we will not be going through all of them simply because of how many there are. I'm going to show you the base ones you can use to alter your theme, but I encourage you to go through this documentation and look at all of these parameters and what they correspond to, because like I said, there really are very few limits to customizing your theme to match either your visual preferences for a theme, what's most inclusive visually for a theme, or even what your publication requirements are for a figure. So you can manually customize almost every non-data element of your plot using this function, and the main parts of these elements include line elements, and these are all functions, which include the axis lines, grid lines, and the plot panel border, etc. The element text, which includes text elements, which are the plot title, axis title, tick mark labels, legend title, etc. The rectangle elements, which are the plot background, the panel background, and the legend background. And then these functions can be used in concert with the theme function to manually change plot elements. So very rapid fire, I'm going to go over the syntax for how you change panel background, panel grid major, and panel grid minor using element rect and element line. And as you can see, looking within element rect and element line, we have some parameters that we've already used in ggplot2, which include fill, color, line width, and line type. So if I want to change my panel background to white with purple as the outline, as well as the line width and the line type, I am going to say I want my fill equal to white, my color equal to purple, my line width equal to 1, and my line type equal to solid. And let's say I want to set my major grid lines with a line width of 0.9, so slightly lower, a line type equal to dashed, and our color equal to blue. I'm going to say line width equal to 0.9, line type equal to dashed, and color equal to blue. And for our minor grid, let's say I want to set line width equal to 0.7, line type equal to dashed, and color equal to blue. We're going to say element line, and within element line, we're going to say line width equal to 0.7, line type equal to dashed, and color equal to blue. And as you can see, there's basically a nesting of functions here, where we have the theme function, and within the theme function parameters, we have the element rect function and the element line function. So let's go ahead and run this code, and we now have a box plot with thick dashed blue major grid lines, thin dashed blue minor grid lines, and a white background with a purple box outlining that white background. And alternatively, if you wanted to remove these elements, we use the element blank function. So again, this is a nesting of functions where we have our theme function, and within our theme function we have our parameters, which we set equal to the element blank function. And now those elements are blank within our plot. So axes can be formatted in the theme function using the element text function. So just as a reminder, this is what our box plot looks like while we plot species versus total length with these particular labels for our axes and our title. So let's go ahead and adjust the justification of our font as well as the font family and angles. There's, like I said, a very large number of parameters we can set. We have our plot title, and again, we use the element text function. We have our axis title. We have our axis text, we have our x-axis title, we have our axis text x, our axis title y, our axis text Y, and our axis text. These are all separate things you can customize. And just as a note, if you don't want to customize your X and Y axis text separately, you can just use the parameter axis.text. So let's go ahead and change the justification, family, and angle of these fonts as well as the color. We are going to set the hjust parameter of the plot title to 0.5. We're going to set the axis title to a serif font. We're going to set the axis text angle to 45 degrees, the axis X title color equal to blue, the axis text for the X equal to size 12, the axis title for the Y axis with an hjust of 1, the axis text for the Y axis with an angle of 45 degrees, and the axis text blank. Thank you for bearing with me. This is a very long one to explain. Let's go ahead and run this particularly large code chunk. And here we have changed the justification for the axis and title. We have changed the font angles. We have changed the font type, and we have also changed the font color. So again, there are quite a few parameters within element text that you can change. So I encourage you to look at all of the documentation for theme and then all of the documentation for element text to look at what you can customize. And there are even more in-depth guides out there than this, but there are simply too many parameters to go all in one webinar section today. And as always, if you have questions, I haven't set this in previous sections, but if you have questions about this after watching these webinar sections, I encourage you to reach out to me as you're making your figures. If you say, hey Abigail, I don't know how to customize this and I couldn't find a quick answer for it on Google. How do I customize this particular part of my figure? I would be happy to go over it with you. So there are many, many other parameters and functions for the theme function that can be combined to customize your graph. But now we're going to go ahead and move on to legends. Legends are included by default with a figure that's plotted using ggplot. For example, the scatter plot below includes a legend on the right, and each point is colored as coral, green, blue, or purple. We can change the position of our legend using the theme function. Options for legend.position include none, left, and right, which are default. And then we have bottom, top, and inside. So I'll show you what this looks like. This is what happens when our legend is on the top. This is what it looks like when our legend is not present, and this is what it looks like when our legend is positioned inside. We can also use coordinates as a vector to set the legend position, and these are within X and Y values that range from 0 to 1. So if we want to set legend position equal to 1, 1 within the vector, that would be an X value of 1 and a Y value of 1. That would put our legend all the way in the top right corner. If we were to set it to 0.5 and 0.5, that would put it smack dab in the middle of our figure. And if we were to set it at 0, 0, that would put it in the bottom left-hand corner. So you can really just kind of play around with these values to see what best fits for your figure. The element text function can be used with theme to change the legend text. If we want to change the text in the body of our legend, we use legend.text, and if we want to change the text in the title of our legend, we use legend.title. So let's go ahead and set the body equal to dark blue and the angle of the text at 45. And for the title, let's say it's bold-faced and we want it to be a smaller size or a larger size at 8. And that's what this looks like. So let's go ahead and say that we wanted to get rid of the legend text, both the title and the body text. We would use what we used in the previous examples, which is element blank. And that's what this looks like. We just have the colors and no text on our legend, which is not a useful legend, but this is here to remind you that that's how you get rid of these elements, is using element_blank as a function. So remember, as always, we can search the Help tab for element text to show us its parameters, and we can use the question mark function as well to do that. So the element rect function can be used with theme to change the legend's color, fill, and the like, just as we did in the plot background above. So let's go ahead and make the outline of our legend purple and the inside background of our legend light blue by setting color equal to purple and fill equal to light blue. Let's change the line width as well as the line type. And we now have a purple dashed line outlining our legend. The background of the legend is blue and the lined width is thinner. So that's all I have in this section on themes and legends. I hope I've given you the tools necessary to start helping you understand how to customize these themes of your figures. And in the next section, we're going to finally go over color schemes and palettes and how to change the default colors that ggplot uses. Thank you as always for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.